Modern botanical extraction often relies on two dominant methods, the alcohol-based tincture and the water-based decoction. Biohackers and herbalists use these liquid mediums to pull active compounds from raw plant material. But a third baseline method predates both. Derived from the ancient Greek word oxymel, meaning literally acid and honey, it operates using entirely different extraction mechanics. The Oxymel functions as a mathematically optimized dual-solvent extraction matrix. It operates by forcing the physical collision of two radically different liquids, raw, unpasteurized vinegar and raw honey. This specific chemical interaction has an unbroken clinical pedigree extending back to 400 BCE, when Hippocrates prescribed it to clear airways in his medical text On Regimen in Acute Diseases. Looking at the Greek inscriptions carved into this ancient marble pedestal, we see the early institutional authority of this botanical science. From those classical origins, it remained continuously documented as a medical delivery system throughout history. The persistence of this formula across millennia relies entirely on a specific biochemical stability that modern extraction science is only now fully quantifying. During the Renaissance, formal pharmacopoeias standardized the Oxymel matrix for wide-scale clinical application. Here, we see an early botanical illustration mapping out a purple-flowered plant directly alongside the structural Greek text of its formulation. The exact ratios of acid to honey required to process these plants were fiercely documented, tested, and debated by leading medical minds. This meticulous standardization allowed the formulation to survive the transition into the modern clinical era. This row of imposing leather-bound volumes is the 19th century Dictionnaire des sciences médicales, where the Oxymel remained heavily cataloged for institutional use. This unbroken chain of clinical documentation shows that the Oxymel is a biologically optimized delivery mechanism, robust enough to outlive the medical philosophies that originally created it. To understand why this dual liquid matrix is so effective, we first have to examine the role of a solvent in botanical extraction chemistry. A solvent is the liquid used to draw active compounds out of solid plant matter. Modern extraction typically relies on a single solvent, either water or alcohol. This forces inherent chemical trade-offs that compromise the final profile of the plant. Consider thermal extraction, specifically decoctions or hot water steeps. Water requires heat to aggressively pull compounds from dense roots and leaves, but heat carries a fatal flaw. It destroys heat-sensitive volatile plant oils, evaporating the delicate aromatics. Thermal energy shatters the fragile molecular bonds of these aromatic compounds long before the extraction is complete. The standard alternative is an alcohol extraction, commonly known as a tincture. While high-proof ethanol is a powerful extractor, it denatures the mucosal soothing properties of the plant, destroying the complex polysaccharides known as mucilage. The ethanol strips away these complex sugars, rendering the plant's natural soothing compounds completely inert. Furthermore, suspending the final medicine in heavy alcohol renders it metabolically unsuitable for a wide range of human biological profiles. Relying on a single solvent forces you to choose between preserving fragile aromatics or extracting heavy compounds. In either case, you fail to capture the whole plant. The Oxymel bypasses these limitations by deploying two solvents simultaneously. The first half of the optimized matrix is raw, unpasteurized acetic acid, typically apple cider vinegar. Within this system, the acetic acid functions primarily as an aggressive cellular penetrant. It cuts through rigid plant defenses, actively dissolving the tough cellulose walls that lock away the plant's internal chemistry. Once that cellular structure collapses, it releases a dense payload, heavy trace minerals, essential vitamins, and complex alkaloids. Extracting these heavy compounds efficiently at room temperature is mathematically impossible using water alone. The acid is required to break the bonds. Acetic acid disintegrates the rigid plant barriers, freeing the heavy, fortified minerals trapped within the structure without the use of destructive heat. To complete the matrix, the acid is paired with a secondary extractor, raw honey. Honey pulls compounds from the plant material using a specific mechanical action known as osmotic pressure. Because raw honey has an incredibly low water content, it creates a steep pressure gradient that forces water-soluble liquids out of the remaining plant tissue and into the solvent. Simultaneously, the raw honey serves a critical secondary function as a highly dense, stabilizing suspension. This suspension actively captures highly fragile, volatile aromatic oils, the exact compounds found in herbs like thyme, rosemary, or pine, forming a protective barrier around them. Sealed off from external forces, these delicate molecules are protected against rapid oxidation and structural degradation. Because osmotic pressure drives the extraction, the entire process bypasses the thermal destruction inherent in hot water extraction. This high osmotic pressure also creates an environment where water activity is simply too low to support harmful bacterial growth. This naturally antimicrobial property guarantees the long-term biochemical stability of the final liquid. This process allows honey to function as a molecular preservative, sealing off the fragile volatile compounds that other solvents inevitably destroy. When you bring the acid and honey together, you achieve the synthesized dual-solvent matrix. The two contrasting fluids integrate into a perfectly stable, unified suspension. This creates a highly efficient division of labor. The acetic acid extracts the heavy molecules, while the honey preserves the light aromatics. Together, they achieve a true, uncompromised full-spectrum capture of the botanical's entire chemical profile. But extraction is only part of the equation. The final required metric for any successful botanical system is bioavailability. Because of the highly acidic and enzymatic nature of the matrix, the resulting liquid is essentially pre-digested. This allows the human body to absorb the payload directly into the bloodstream without expending additional metabolic energy to break it down. The completed Oxymel is the exact sum of its optimized parts, a complete, shelf-stable, uncompromised botanical extraction. At HIVE, our core philosophy is that true optimization requires applying rigorous, modern technological frameworks to ancient methodologies. By focusing entirely on the exact mechanisms of action, we elevate the Oxymel from a folk recipe into a precision clinical instrument. We see the final resolved product right here in this representation of the HIVE Botanical Tonic, uncompromised by thermal energy or ethanol. This dual-solvent matrix delivers a complete botanical extraction in its most bioavailable state.